When my father died, I thought grief would be the hardest part. I was wrong. At the will reading, my stepmother Vivian wore black silk and fake tears. Her son Ryan lounged beside her, already smiling like the new heir. The lawyer's voice trembled as he read the document, every word slicing deeper. The company, the mansion, the yacht, all theirs. And me? A single envelope. Inside a one-way ticket to London. They laughed. Vivian leaned close, whispering, "Guess your father wanted you out of the picture." I wanted to scream, to tear that ticket apart, but something about it felt deliberate, like a message meant only for me. So I packed my bag and left. What I didn't know was that across the ocean, a woman I'd never met was waiting, and when she finally spoke to me, her 4 words changed everything I believed about my life. The sky was gray. The morning they read my father's will, the kind of gray that swallows sunlight and hope alike. I sat at the long mahogany table surrounded by people who didn't belong to me, even if they shared my last name. Vivian, my stepmother, looked flawless in her grief. Her makeup was perfect, her pearl necklace glimmered under the chandelier, and not a single tear smudged her mascara. Her son Ryan scrolled on his phone, pretending not to care, but his smirk said it all. The lawyer cleared his throat. Per the wishes of Mr. Richard Carter, all holdings, including Carter Enterprises, the Manhattan Mansion, and the yacht Serenity, are to be transferred to Mrs. Vivian Carter and her son, Ryan Carter. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. My fingers clenched around the edge of my chair. "There must be some mistake," I whispered. "I'm his daughter." The lawyer didn't even look at me. He flipped a page. "Miss Emily Carter will receive an envelope prepared by the deceased." Vivian turned her head slightly, eyes glinting like glass. "An envelope?" she echoed, feigning pity. "How symbolic," Ryan chuckled. "Guess Dad wanted to make sure you travel light." Laughter echoed in the room, the sound of victory disguised as sympathy. When the envelope slid across the table toward me, my hands trembled. It was sealed with red wax, my father's handwriting neat and precise. For Emily. Inside, just one thing, a plane ticket to London. One way. No money, no letter, no explanation. I looked up. Vivian's red lips curved into a smile that could cut glass. "London's lovely this time of year," she purred. "You should leave soon." I could feel heat crawling up my neck, humiliation burning under my skin. For years, I'd tried to earn my father's approval. I studied, worked hard, stayed out of scandals. I wanted him to see me not as a burden, not as a reminder of the woman he divorced, but as his daughter. And this was my reward. Exile wrapped in expensive paper. When I walked out of that office, the city lights blurred through tears I refused to shed. I stood in the cold wind, clutching the ticket. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a message. I didn't know what kind yet, revenge, redemption, or revelation, but I could feel it. Something waited for me in London, and for once in my life, I wasn't going to run from it. I returned to the mansion one last time, not to say goodbye, but to remember what I was walking away from. The house loomed like a marble tomb, beautiful and lifeless. Every window glowed with gold light, every corner whispered of secrets I was never allowed to touch. Vivian's voice drifted from the dining room, sharp and sweet as poison. "Ryan, darling, make sure the decorators arrive by Friday. I want the study turned into your new office." "Sure thing, Mom," he replied, glancing up just long enough to smirk at me standing in the doorway. "Don't forget to lock the door when she's gone." Vivian looked at me with a smile that wasn't one. "Emily, you should start packing. The driver can take you to the airport tomorrow. Unless you'd rather walk, might save us the gas money." Her laughter followed me up the grand staircase, echoing off the marble like a curse. In my room, half-empty shelves stared back at me. I ran my fingers over the faint ring of dust where my father's photo once stood. He'd been young in that picture, smiling with an arm around me at a park. I'd almost forgotten that version of him before Vivian, before the coldness. A knock interrupted my thoughts. The butler, old Mr. Harris, stood in the doorway. His eyes softened when he saw my suitcase. "Miss Emily, your father was a complicated man, but he wasn't cruel. If he left you that ticket, there's a reason." "A reason to humiliate me?" I asked bitterly. He shook his head. Maybe to lead you somewhere he couldn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window watching rain crawl down the glass, the city humming below like a machine that didn't care. My mind kept circling back to the ticket. Why London? I remembered my father's old study, the one room Vivian never entered. On impulse, I slipped inside. The air smelled of leather and dust. I searched through drawers until I found a small, locked box, the kind my father used for documents. Inside, just a faded photograph. A woman standing by the River Thames, smiling, with eyes that looked hauntingly familiar. There was no name, no date, just the faintest handwritten note on the back. For her. One day she'll understand. The photo sent a chill through me. I packed it with the ticket, my passport, and the little courage I had left. At dawn, I dragged my suitcase through the silent hall. The chandeliers glimmered faintly, like ghosts watching me go. Outside, the wind bit at my face as the driver loaded my bags. Vivian appeared on the porch in her silk robe, coffee in hand. "Bon voyage, sweetheart," she said, mockingly cheerful. "Maybe you'll find yourself over there." I met her gaze one last time. "Maybe I will," I replied, and closed the car door. As the mansion disappeared behind me, I felt the weight of my past fall away, heavy, but freeing. The ticket in my pocket wasn't humiliation anymore. It was a beginning. The flight felt longer than it should have. 8 hours of turbulence and silence, of staring out at endless clouds while my life unraveled behind me. When the plane finally descended through the thick London fog, my stomach twisted not from fear, but from the weight of not knowing what waited below. The air at Heathrow was cold, damp, and smelled faintly of rain and metal. I collected my single suitcase and the envelope that had started it all. The address inside was written in my father's unmistakable handwriting, elegant, deliberate. Harrington Square. No. 14. I didn't know anyone named Harrington, but something about the way he wrote it, the steadiness of each letter, told me this wasn't random. I took a black cab, the kind that rattled like it had seen centuries. The driver was chatty in that London way, his accent thick. "Visiting family, miss?" "Something like that," I murmured. He didn't press further, thank God. When we pulled into Harrington Square, the rain had turned to mist. Elegant townhouses lined the cobblestone street, their wrought iron balconies dripping with ivy. The taxi stopped in front of No. 14, a gray brick estate with tall windows and a massive black door that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. I hesitated. The address could have been a mistake. Maybe my father meant to send someone else here, a business contact, a friend. But my name was on the ticket, and I'd already crossed an ocean for this. I rang the bell. At first, nothing. Then footsteps echoed from inside, slow and measured. The door creaked open, revealing an elderly man in a black waistcoat, his expression polite but puzzled. "Good afternoon, miss. May I help you?" I hesitated. "I was told to come here. My father left me this address. Richard Carter." The man froze. His eyes flickered not with surprise, but recognition. "Mr. Carter," he repeated softly. "It's been a very long time." He stepped aside. "Please, come in." The air inside the house was warm and faintly perfumed with sandalwood. The entryway gleamed with old portraits and chandeliers, the kind that whispered of old money and older secrets. "May I ask your name, miss?" "Emily. Emily Carter." The butler's expression softened, a flicker of emotion in his eyes. "Of course, Miss Emily. We've been expecting someone." "Expecting someone?" I echoed. "Who?" He didn't answer. Instead, he gestured to the hallway. "Wait here, please." As his footsteps faded down the corridor, I looked around. On the wall hung a large portrait of a woman in a crimson gown, graceful, elegant, maybe in her 40s. Something in her face caught me. The eyes. Deep, gray, blue, filled with the same sadness I'd seen in my own reflection too many times. A clock ticked softly. My chest tightened with unease and curiosity. Then, from somewhere down the hall, I heard hurried footsteps, lighter this time. Sharper, followed by a woman's voice. "Did you say Carter?" The butler's reply was muffled, but the next sound was clear heels clicking on marble, fast and sure. And then she appeared. A woman stepped into the hallway, tall, commanding, draped in a long beige coat and pearls that caught the chandelier light. Her hair was silver, swept back elegantly, and her face was both fierce and heartbreakingly familiar. She stopped a few feet from me, eyes widening as if she'd seen a ghost. "Emily," she whispered. "My God, you have his eyes." I blinked. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" She took a step closer, trembling slightly. "Not yet, but you will." And before I could speak, she said 4 words that froze me where I stood. "I am your mother." The room seemed to tilt, the world shrinking to the sound of her voice. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. London wasn't just a destination. It was the truth my father had hidden my whole life. "I'm your mother." The words echoed in my head, slow and heavy, like thunder rolling through a storm. For a moment, I just stared at her, at the woman with perfect posture and trembling lips, trying to find a trace of sense in what she said. "That's not possible," I finally whispered. "My mother died when I was 2. Her expression shattered. "That's what your father told you, wasn't it?" She took another step toward me, her voice trembling between guilt and longing. "Emily, my name is Margaret Harrington. I never died. Your father took you from me." The butler quietly slipped out of the room, leaving us in silence so thick it was hard to breathe. "You're lying," I said, backing away. "Why would he do that?" She pulled a pendant from around her neck, a silver locket shaped like a teardrop. She opened it and held it out. Inside was a small photograph, a baby in a white blanket, and beside her, a much younger version of the woman standing before me, smiling, radiant, unmistakably real. "You were 6 months old when he took you," she said softly. "He was afraid. My family didn't approve of him. We were from 2 different worlds. I was born into this," she gestured around the opulent foyer, "and he came from nothing. When he realized they'd never accept him, he disappeared, and he took you with him." I stared at the photo, at the baby with the same tiny birthmark under her left eye, the same one I'd always tried to hide with makeup. My throat tightened. "Why didn't you find me?" I demanded, voice cracking. "You're rich, powerful. You could have done something." Tears gathered in her eyes, but her tone stayed steady. "I searched for years, but he changed his name, changed yours too. Every trace of you vanished. I thought you were dead." The chandelier above us flickered as if reacting to the tension in the air. I felt my knees weaken, my whole body shaking with confusion, anger, grief, all tangled together. Margaret reached for me, but I stepped back. "Don't," I said, my voice trembling. "Don't touch me. You're a stranger." "I know," she whispered, pain in every word. "But you're also my daughter, and I've waited 30 years for this moment." We stood there, 2 women bound by blood and broken years, staring across a chasm neither of us knew how to cross. Finally, she spoke again, her voice fragile but firm. "Your father left you that ticket for a reason. He wanted you to find me." I laughed bitterly through the tears burning my eyes. "No, he wanted to get rid of me." "No, Emily." Her tone sharpened. "He wanted you to know the truth before it was too late." She reached into her coat pocket and handed me an old envelope. "He sent this to me years ago. I never opened it until now." Inside was a single folded letter, dated 6 months before my father's death. His handwriting, the same elegant, calculated script I knew so well, filled the page. "Margaret, I can't keep hiding. She deserves to know who you are. One day, she'll find this ticket and follow it home." My chest ached so fiercely I had to grip the edge of a table to stand. My father hadn't banished me. He'd led me here. Margaret reached for me again, this time slowly, gently, and for the first time, I didn't pull away. "You've suffered enough," she whispered. "But you're home now, Emily. You're finally home." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My world had been rewritten in a single afternoon. The stepmother who raised me had stolen my peace. The father who ignored me had hidden a truth. And the stranger in pearls before me, she wasn't a stranger at all. She was the mother I'd been missing my entire life. I spent the night at Margaret's estate, though sleep never came. My thoughts twisted between disbelief and reluctant acceptance. Every corner of the mansion whispered of a world I was never meant to see: the gleam of silver-framed portraits, the velvet hush of hallways, the faint scent of lavender and expensive wine. At dawn, I found her in the sunroom, sitting by the tall windows overlooking the garden. She looked calm, but her eyes, the same storm gray as mine, carried decades of regret. "You didn't have to stay," she said softly when she saw me. "I couldn't leave," I admitted. "Not until I know everything." She nodded slowly. "Then you deserve the truth." Margaret began to speak her words, steady, deliberate, but full of wounds that never healed. "Your father and I met 32 years ago," she said. "He was a young architect working on a renovation for my family's firm. Ambitious, brilliant, and so proud. He wanted to build his own empire, not live off anyone's fortune. I loved that about him." Her voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. "We fell in love quietly. My father despised him, said he was chasing my money. When I became pregnant with you, they tried to force me to end it. I refused. Richard promised to protect me. To protect you. We ran away." She paused, taking a trembling breath. "But love isn't enough when the world is built on power and pride." I stared at her hands, perfectly manicured, yet trembling as if holding ghosts. "What happened?" I asked. "We were happy for a while," she whispered. "But when money ran short, he changed. He couldn't stand being looked down on. He stopped letting me contact my family. And one night, when you were barely 6 months old, I woke up and both of you were gone." My heart sank. "He kidnapped me?" Margaret's lips quivered. "Yes. He sent me one letter afterward. It said, 'I can't raise her in a world that hates me.' Then he vanished. By the time I found traces of him in America, he'd changed his name to Carter. You were already registered as his daughter and I had no legal claim." I felt a sharp ache behind my ribs. The father I'd defended for years, the man I'd tried to please, had stolen my entire life. "He made me believe my mother was dead," I said, voice shaking. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I thought you were dead too." The silence that followed felt sacred and unbearable. Margaret stood and crossed to an old cabinet, pulling out a velvet box. Inside were documents, newspaper clippings, private investigators' reports, even faded photographs of me as a toddler. "I never stopped looking," she said. "Every birthday, I lit a candle and told myself you'd find your way back. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I cried years of loneliness, resentment, confusion, all pouring out at once." She held me, her embrace trembling but sure, like she'd rehearsed it 1,000 times in her dreams. "He was wrong," she whispered into my hair. "Running didn't protect you, it only broke us both." I pulled back, wiping my eyes. "So now what? What do I do with all this?" She smiled sadly. "You start over. You stop surviving and start living. You have my name, my blood, my home, and whatever comes next, we face it together." For the first time in my life, I felt something I'd never known in the Carter mansion: belonging. But even as she spoke, I felt a familiar vibration in my pocket. My phone lit up with a name I hadn't expected to see again. "Vivian Carter." The message was short. "Emily, please, we need to talk. It's urgent." I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. "After everything, why now?" Margaret saw my face pale. "Who is it?" "My stepmother," I said quietly. "And she never says please." That was when I realized the past I thought I'd escaped was not finished with me yet. I ignored Vivian's message for 2 days, hoping silence would make her disappear. But she didn't. By the third night, my phone buzzed again, not a text this time, but a video call. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her face filled the screen, almost unrecognizable. The woman who once wore diamonds and power like armor now looked hollow. Her lipstick was gone, her eyes swollen and tired. Behind her, the mansion that once gleamed like a palace looked dim and stripped bare. "Emily," she said, voice trembling, "please don't hang up." I stayed silent. "Everything's gone," she continued, the words tumbling out. "The company's bankrupt. The investors pulled out. The yacht was seized last week. Even the house is under foreclosure." I felt a strange stillness inside me. Not satisfaction, not joy, just emptiness. The empire that had humiliated me was collapsing, and somehow, it didn't make me feel better. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know I don't deserve your sympathy. But Ryan, he's lost, Emily. He drinks all day. He's terrified." Her voice cracked, and for the first time, she sounded almost human. You have to help us, she said desperately. You have money now, don't you? That woman Margaret, she's your mother, isn't she? The Harrington family is powerful. Please, talk to her. Help us. We're still your family. Something inside me snapped. Family? I said sharply. You stole that word from me years ago. You laughed when I was thrown out. You called me worthless. Her eyes filled with tears. I know, and I hate myself for it. But you're the only one who can fix this. Fix it? I scoffed. You think money fixes everything? Maybe it did for you, but not anymore. There was silence. Then, faintly, I heard Ryan's voice in the background, loud, angry. Why are you begging her, Mom? She's nothing. She's the reason Dad cut us off. I clenched my jaw, my pulse pounding. Tell him, I said coldly, that Dad left me a ticket, not a fortune. The only thing he cut was the truth from all of us. Vivian tried to speak, but I ended the call before she could. I sat there shaking, anger and sadness mixing like poison. Margaret found me minutes later, standing by the window, my phone still in my hand. Was it her? She asked quietly. I nodded. They've lost everything. She wants me to help. Idri. Margaret's expression didn't change. She simply walked over, placed a hand on my shoulder, and said, And what do you want, Emily? That question hit harder than I expected. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? Closure? I didn't even know anymore. After a long silence, I whispered, I want to see them one last time. Not for them. For me. Margaret studied me, then nodded. Then we go together. You won't face them alone. 2 days later, we boarded a flight to New York. As the plane soared above the Atlantic, I stared out the window at the dark clouds and thought about how small everything looked from above, even pain. When we landed, the cold Manhattan air greeted me like a memory I didn't want to relive. We drove through streets that once felt suffocating, past buildings my father had built, monuments to his pride. The Carter Mansion appeared at the end of the avenue, a shadow of its former glory. The iron gates were rusted, the garden overgrown, the windows dark. The golden crest that once gleamed on the front door was now dull and cracked. I stood outside, my breath fogging in the air. You don't have to do this, Margaret said softly beside me. I do, I murmured. I need to end it where it began. The gate creaked open as if recognizing me. And as I stepped onto the cold stone path leading to the house that had once rejected me, I felt no fear, only resolve. This time, I wasn't the girl they'd mocked. I was the woman they'd made, and I was coming home to finish the story. The door opened before I could knock. Vivian stood there, or rather, what was left of her. Her once perfect hair hung limp, her silk robe replaced by a wrinkled sweater. The smell of stale perfume and cheap wine drifted out. Behind her, the grand foyer looked gutted, paintings gone, chandeliers dim, furniture draped in white sheets like ghosts of better days. Emily, she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You came. You asked me to, I replied evenly. Her gaze flicked to Margaret standing just behind me, composed and radiant in her cream coat. The contrast between them was almost cruel. Mrs. Harrington, Vivian murmured stiffly, trying to straighten her shoulders. Thank you for bringing Emily. I'm sure this is difficult for everyone. Difficult? Margaret's voice was soft, but carried the weight of command. You stole my child's peace for 30 years. I believe difficult is the least of what this should be. Vivian's mask cracked. I didn't steal anything. Your husband did. I only benefited from the theft? Margaret cut in, her tone icy. You knew who Emily was, didn't you? Vivian hesitated, then looked away. Richard told me once, but he said you didn't want her, that you'd moved on. I believed him. You didn't just believe him, I said quietly. You built your life on that lie. From the staircase, Ryan's voice broke the tension. Oh great, the prodigal daughter's back, he sneered. What, here to flaunt your new fortune? He stumbled down the steps, his shirt half-buttoned, eyes red. The arrogance he once wore like armor had curdled into bitterness. I'm here because your mother begged me to come, I said. Not for revenge, for closure. He laughed harshly. Closure? You think showing off your fancy mother gives you closure? Margaret stepped forward. Watch your tone, young man. Ryan's jaw tightened. You think money makes you better than us? No, I said, steady but firm. But kindness does, and you never learned either. The room fell silent. Vivian sank into an armchair, hands trembling. Please, she whispered. We have nothing left. The house will be gone by next week. If you could just ask your mother. Margaret held up a hand. I already decided. Vivian looked up hopefully. The Harrington Foundation will transfer a modest sum to your account, Margaret said coldly. Enough to start over. But you will never contact Emily again. Ever. Vivian blinked, disbelief, and shame flickering across her face. You'd do that? Even after everything? Not for you, Margaret said. For her. So she can live without the weight of your name. Tears streamed down Vivian's cheeks. Thank you, she whispered, voice hollow. But Ryan stood rigid, fists clenched. We don't need your charity, he spat. We're Carters. We'll rise again. I met his glare, calm now. Then do it without me. He turned away, muttering curses, but the fight had drained out of him. For a moment, the only sound was the soft ticking of the grandfather clock, the same one that had watched me sit alone at countless dinners years ago. I looked at Vivian, truly looked at her, and for the first time, I saw not a villain, but a broken woman drowning in the consequences she'd earned. I forgive you, I said quietly. But don't mistake that for forgetting. Her sob broke the silence. Margaret touched my arm gently. It's time to go, sweetheart. I nodded. As we stepped out into the cold air, the heavy front door creaked shut behind us, a sound like a chapter closing for good. The sky was gray again, but this time, it didn't feel oppressive. It felt clean. Margaret slipped her arm around mine as we walked toward the car. You did well, she said softly. It doesn't feel like victory, I murmured. It's not meant to, she replied. It's freedom. And as the mansion faded behind us, I finally believed her. We didn't speak during the drive back to the city. The silence wasn't awkward, it was heavy, necessary, cleansing. I stared out the car window as the Carter mansion disappeared behind the trees, shrinking until it was nothing but a shadow on the skyline. For years, that place had defined me, the walls that confined me, the people who broke me, the ghosts that whispered I'd never be enough. Now, it was just a house. Margaret reached across the seat, her hand finding mine. You closed the door, Emily. That's more courage than most ever find. I nodded, my throat tight. I just wish my father could see me now. He does, she said softly, in ways you can't imagine. The next morning, we visited his grave. The air was sharp with winter wind, the marble headstone cold beneath my fingertips. I placed a small bouquet of white lilies, his favorite, at its base. For a long time I couldn't speak. Then the words came, quiet but sure. You lied to me, I whispered. But you also led me here. Maybe that was your way of making things right. Margaret stood beside me, silent, her presence warm and solid. Together, we watched the sunlight break through the clouds, spilling gold over the cemetery. I took one last breath of that cold New York air, then turned away. When we returned to London, the Harrington estate no longer felt like a stranger's home. It was ours. Mine. I started working with Margaret at the Harrington Foundation, using the wealth she once wielded for power to rebuild lives instead. It felt poetic, using what had divided my parents to heal others. Every day, I learned something new about my mother. Her resilience, her humor, the way she never apologized for being strong. And with each passing week, I saw more of her in myself. One evening, as I stood on the balcony overlooking the Thames, the city lights reflecting like scattered stars, Margaret joined me with 2 cups of tea. Thinking again? She teased gently. Always, I said, smiling faintly. About how strange it feels to finally belong somewhere. She set her cup down, draping her shawl over my shoulders. You've always belonged, Emily. You just had to find the right place and the right truth. I looked out over London, the city that had started as my exile and become my home. It's funny, I said quietly. That ticket felt like punishment, but it was the best thing my father ever gave me. Margaret nodded. Sometimes love looks like cruelty when it's trying to lead you somewhere better. The wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of rain and river water. I closed my eyes, letting it wash over me. For the first time in my life, there was no bitterness left, only peace. I thought of Vivian and Ryan, somewhere far away, rebuilding their lives. I didn't wish them harm. I didn't wish them anything at all. They were simply part of a past I had finally outgrown. Later that night, I opened the drawer in my room and found the plane ticket my father had left me. I smoothed its edges, now yellowed and creased, and smiled. "Thank you," I whispered, "for setting me free." Outside, the city shimmered in the quiet glow of night. Somewhere, the bells of Westminster tolled softly, a new hour, a new beginning. And as I stood there in the golden light, I realized something simple and powerful. I hadn't lost a family. I had found one. And for the first time, I wasn't running anymore. I was home.